Well, this is Dr. Stan back here at Radio Liberty, coming to you from the hills overlooking beautiful and picturesque Monterey Bay and bringing you the news, behind the news, the story, behind the story. Hoping to convince you that reality is usually scoffed at and that illusion is usually king. But in the battle for survival of Western civilization, it's going to be reality, not illusion or delusion, that will determine what the future will bring. And I need to remind you the views expressed here are not necessarily those of the owners, management, staff, sponsors, or supporters of the station you're listening to. They're my views, and well, for the next hour, they're going to be the views of Bob Chapman from the International Forecaster. And we're going to be talking about what I believe is the planned demise of the monetary system of the Western world. You know, basically, Ben Bernanke says, well, we've got to get the economy going, and that's why we're going to keep interest rates at zero, and why we're, of course, going to massively expand $600 billion we're going to pour into the monetary system. And then, of course, we have another $864 billion in the stimulus bill that we put out, and that comes to about $1.5 billion, $1.5 trillion are going to be spending. And yet, of course, we know that certainly that the banks are sitting on about $3 trillion. Our corporations are sitting on $5 trillion. According to an article I just read today in Asia Times by one of my favorite authors, the rest of the central banks over the last 2 years have increased the amount of money. The exact figure escapes me, but it's about $5 trillion they have in additional reserves throughout the world. And as he points out, he said they've done half of this in the last 2 years, and basically nothing like this has ever happened before throughout all history. What does this mean? It means that with all this massive amount of money, they are going to wreck and destroy the world monetary system and impoverish our people. You're going to see oil going up to $5 to $6 a gallon here within just a relatively few months. You're going to see the price of food double here probably this year, at least 50%. And the price of most other things, certainly I just got my catalog from the place where I buy my food. The price for my briefs, my underwear, went up 25% in the last 2 months. The price of the shirts went up 25% in the last 2 months. The price of everything is going up. It's already, of course, Ben Bernanke says, what if you take food and fuel and everything that's going up out of the prices? Why? Certainly there's nothing to worry about. There is no inflation. And that is the justification for what they're doing. They know what is happening. These are not stupid men. The only logical explanation, knowing we already have a producer price index, that's known as the PPI. The PPI is 14%. That means the producers are having to pay 14% more to produce their products. Are they simply going to absorb that? They're going to have to pass that on. So you're talking about certainly within 3 or 4 months, while the cost of products produced in America on average is going up 14%. Why aren't they cutting off certainly what they're doing? Why aren't they cutting back on putting all this money out? Why aren't they certainly beginning to raise interest rates to try to stop rampant inflation that's coming? Bob, why aren't they trying to stop? They have to know the rampant inflation is going to be upon us.
Well, it's for the same reason that Mr. Bernanke and Michael Boskin wrote a paper in 1988 stating that what Mr. Bernanke is doing today doesn't work.
But of course, this will end up destroying our monetary system and empowering.
Well, they know that, and as you and I have contended for I don't know how long, this is what they're up to.
I know, and it is so tragic. The people who don't understand are going to get wiped out. The people who followed your advice are going to do very well, especially with a day-to-day like we had with Silver Opal.
Yeah, it's powerful.
Well, this is Dr. Stan, and certainly Bob was just saying that J.P. Morgan Chase and HSBC, that's Hong Kong Singapore Banking Corporation, these two are probably going to lose between $15 and $40 billion. As because of their silver short positions and silver's running. But you don't have to worry about them. They said they are going to do very well because they're going to get bailed out by the Obama administration. There's a new chief of staff. His name is William Daley. He's going to take the place of Rahm Emanuel, sort of running the White House. Where do you think William Daley came from? Did he come from some school someplace, some university where he was trained in this sort of thing? No, he came from J.P. Morgan Chase Bank, and the new fellow who's going to take on the job of chief economic advisor to the president. Where does he come from? Goldman Sachs. They're all in bed together, and until people understand that the whole thing is a scam, we are owned by the banks. They control this country. Not until somebody has the courage to say that. Besides Ron Paul, is anything going to change? Pick up the story, Bob.
Well, I think Ron is going to make inroads this time, and just through hearings and subpoena power. And even if he can't get legislation to pass to investigate and audit the Fed, he will back into what he needs to back into to find out what they're doing. Maybe not as much as he could with an open book sort of investigation. But they at the Fed have been doing things they don't tell anybody about. And they're illegal. Swaps that don't exist, but they do. I mean, you go to several other governments and say, here, I'm going to give you $1 trillion, and you five central banks, you give me $200 billion each. And that way I can go in the market via yourselves and purchase treasury bills, and no one will know what I'm doing. They'll think you're doing it. They've been doing it for a long time. But they just keep on creating money, and they're all carrying two sets of books. It's incredible what's going on, and the media won't cover it. The financial media certainly won't cover it because they'll lose their jobs, and the markets won't go up anymore. And so that is the problem with the Fed. And we predicted here in this program in May that there would be QE2, and it would be $1.7 trillion again, including the stimulus, and that's what it'll amount to by June, maybe as late as July, and because we don't know really how much they've spent, and probably by the fall or early next year we'll have QE3. And they keep on degrading the value of the dollar. I mean, the dollar broke below 77 on the USDX today. That USDX is 6 major currencies versus the dollar. And, of course, the dollar and other currencies are doing terrible versus gold and silver over the last 10 years. Gold 15.25% annual gains against the average of the 9 currencies. And silver 20 3/8% annual gain. And, of course, you never hear about that on Bloomberg or CNBC or CNN, et cetera, Fox, because they don't want you to know that's where all the money's been made, including the commodity market. And so they're going to play this game until they decide that it's time to pull the plug. And they're going to do that, and it'll probably be accompanied by another aggressive action against another country. And, of course, the main probable victim will probably be Iran.
We have to have a war to take the people's attention off of what you've done at home here. And basically, back in 1979 when the CIA toppled the Shah of Iran and brought the Ayatollah, who the CIA had been supporting for many years in luxurious style there in Paris, and they flew him to power, to Iran to seize power. And I couldn't understand why in heaven's name we would topple a friend and bring an enemy to power. It didn't make any sense in 1979. But now, of course, 30 years later, it makes a lot of sense. Long-term planning. They were planning the coming war even then. And certainly I think it's coming. I just don't know when it's coming, what the trigger's going to be. But there's certainly an awful lot of people are going to get injured and damaged in what's going on. And even still more frightening is the prospect of Pakistan falling to the radical Islamists. And, of course, they have nuclear weapons, which we gave them the technology to build. And, of course, which I fear are going to be used sooner or later, either against India or Iran or maybe against Israel, who knows, maybe even against the United States from a freighter. People say it couldn't happen. I would say, why not? If God is just, He is going to bring His justice on America. People don't like to hear that sort of talk, but it's accurate. Well, Bob, certainly, as we look and see what's happening financially throughout the world, certainly they're having rapid rise in the price of food and fuel in countries throughout the world. Some people say that was even a factor in all the social unrest in the Middle East. People were out in the streets shouting, give us sugar, give us salt. Why? Because they doubled the prices over there as a direct result of the policies of Ben Bernanke flooding the world with money. What's your take on that concept?
Well, what happens, and has been happening for some time, is that the Fed creates money and credit far more than they have revenues coming in. And this debt creation is used to essentially keep the game going. And the game takes lots of twists and turns. When we had this incident in Tunisia 5 weeks ago, I said that it has all the earmarks of a CIA operation. And then it was quickly followed by Egypt. And I thought that the main reason was to take people's attention away from the financial problems in the United States, England, and in Europe. And I think that's true. Secondly, I think they wanted to remove Mr. Mubarak because he wouldn't go along with the invasion of Iran. And in the meantime, I think that they turned other nations deliberately upside down by having demonstrations and so on. And, of course, Libya was an unusual case considering the others, whereby the dictator doesn't want to leave and is wantonly killing people. And so if you have this type of consternation and disruption going on, then you have an easier path to invasion. So I think these are the things and the reasons why these things were done. There's tremendous risk here. And the risk is, well, supposing the favorites of France, Britain, and the United States don't take the reins of power, they got a problem. They're going to have to go out and kill that leadership, which is not unusual. I mean, they do that all the time. And so that's the path I think we're taking. In the meantime, oil prices are near $100 a barrel. Food prices, as Stan just said, are moving into the stratosphere, and they're not going to stop. Sure, the world's going to have floods and fires and bad planting or whatever. But more importantly, you've got a situation where money is being driven from other investments like bonds. The bond market rally, I believe, is over. So people are leaving bonds, and that's why the yields on the bonds are going up, because the principal is falling because the principal bonds are being sold. And on the other hand, the stock market is way beyond itself, and it's probably going to correct from here. So they don't want to be there either. So they'll continue to go into gold and silver and into commodities. Well, those commodities are the things that we use and eat. And that flight of capital is not going to slow down. It's going to continue unabated. And it's going to continue at least for a year and a half to 2 years, driving the price of all of the things that trade on the commodity market.
Well, I read the most amazing article in the Asia Times today, and I've forgotten whether it was this fellow Pepe who writes there or somebody else, but he was talking about how all the other central banks are simply creating money so that there's just trillions and trillions and trillions more in reserves, all throughout the central banks, certainly of Europe, which is unprecedented. I mean, they've almost doubled their reserves just by creating them out of nothing over this last few months. Have you looked into that at all? Have you heard about that?
Yeah. We've been writing about it, and that's why I tell people you can look at the USDX index, and that's okay. All of the currencies are fiat. What you've got to do is watch all the currencies and their value in relation to gold and silver.
Our telephone number is 1-888-24-LIBERTY. 1-888-24-LIBERTY or 464-8295. You need to get this information. You need to read the International Forecaster. You need to listen to Radio Liberty. You need to help get the warning out, because most people are going to be caught flat-footed and are going bankrupt. Well, this is Dr. Stan. Certainly Bob was just pointing out that certainly because of what's going on over in Libya, why, of course, the oil goes up $1 a barrel or so in one day, and the Saudis can make that up. They're actually limiting their production, but it's all perception. The American people said, oh, yes, certainly the price is going up because of what's happening in Libya, and it's all contrived to justify raising the price of oil. And I can see this going to $150 to $200 a barrel within, 6 months, 9 months? What do you think, Bob?
Well, first of all, to finish up with the proposal by Saudi Arabia, the people, the producer, Libya, has very, very low sulfur content oil. And that means that the Saudis would have to produce 3 barrels of oil to replace. Now, the 1 barrel of oil that Libya is not producing. That's 3 to 1. So that's one heck of a lot of oil. So it would be like supplying 6% of the world's oil. And so the Saudis didn't give you the whole equation. They didn't tell you the total truth. They misled people. They didn't go into the details, which I just did. And most people don't realize that. So oil and gas prices are going to stay at this level as long as the turmoil exists in the Middle East. And where will they go? I don't know. They probably will go higher. How much? I don't know. How long will it take to quiet the civil war now in Libya? I don't know. If I had to guess, they're talking about setting in sanctions. But if I had to guess, probably a month or 2, and that's it. But you've got Oman demonstrating today. Bahrain has been very violent. Yemen, Jordan, and of course you still have the problem in Egypt, and who knows who's going to take over the government there. And while all this is going on, the U.S. is planning to pick the right spot in conjunction with how bad the financial and economic situation is, they're going to pick a spot to pull the plug and have their war simultaneously with all of these problems. And then they'll stand up there and say, oh, we got terrible problems, but we didn't create them. Not the banks, not Wall Street, not transnational conglomerates. The war did it.
Right.
And this is what they have done historically over and over and over again.
Well, we have Larry calling from Spokane. Our telephone number is 1-888-24-LIBERTY, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, or 464-8295. And if you have a question or comment, give us a call. But let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, we are living in tumultuous times. The world will never be the same again. The plan is to lower the living standards of the American people, to raise the price of oil, to raise the price of electricity, to raise the price of certainly of water, to raise the price of food. I mean, this is why they're tearing down dams all across America, why they refuse to get the dams in and certainly to build the canals and all the things that needed to be done so there'd be adequate water. They want to create chaos in America, as they've created chaos in the Central Valley of California and have impoverished the people there, have destroyed the economy, and they've done it intentionally to protect a 3-inch smelt. Our telephone number, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, 464-8295. Hi, Larry. How are you doing? Do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, Dr. Stan, I would like to run something by Mr. Chapman. Last week you had Joel Skousen on, who I'm sure Mr. Chapman is familiar with, and he said something that really caught my ear, and I appreciate hearing what Mr. Chapman's thought is on that. You folks were talking about hyperinflation, and I think I understood Mr. Skousen to say that there's, a couple of $100 trillion out there in circulating dollars, and then there's several $100 trillion more that is out there but not circulating. And he said you can't have hyperinflation unless that's put back into the hands of society, and the mechanisms don't exist to put that much money back in.
Well, there's one problem, Larry. Nobody defines the term. What do you mean when you talk about hyperinflation?
Yeah,
Until we define our terms, none of this makes sense. So
I wondered that myself, what percentage it has to be hyper. But
so, Bob, why don't you take a stab at that? Hang on, we'll be back in just a moment here. And I realize, of course, that it's difficult to comment on what somebody else has said when we're not quite sure what he said because we didn't define the terms. Hold that thought, and this is Dr. Stan. Our guest, of course, is Bob Chapman, and we have Larry calling from Spokane, asking about hyperinflation. And Bob is saying that inflation is when the prices are going up, or at least a reflection of the increase in the money supply. Hyperinflation, according to Bob, is when people suddenly realize the money is losing value, and they're just anxious to get rid of it any way they can. As a result, they just start buying things frantically, just so they're not left holding money. So like when you pay musical chairs, you want to get a chair then when the music stops. And so when we have this flooding the economy with dollars, the last thing you want is be stuck with dollars when the music stops playing. Our telephone number is 1-888-24-LIBERTY or 464-8295. Bob, anything else you'd like to say to Larry?
Yes. And I think where many people miss the boat is that it's true that the amount of money that has been given or lent to banks, they have reduced their lending to industry and others by about 28% over the last couple of years. But the question is, what have they done with the money? Well, they have bought treasuries. That causes monetization. That causes inflation. They are also deeply and highly leveragedly speculating in the world markets. I mean, you've seen their earnings 3 months in a row They never, like 4 or 5 banks, never had a losing day. That's impossible. I was a trader for 25 years. I mean, if I had 55% positive trades net of all the trades I made a lot of money. So they're creating inside information. But the monetization process is taking place, and Mr. Skousen is wrong.
All right, fine. I think it's a matter of defining terms there, Larry. Go ahead. Anything else you'd like to say?
Yeah, well, I thank you, Mr. Chapman. That clarified things a lot for me. It sounds like it's not so much the number of dollars floating around, but the people wanting to get rid of it.
Right.
And that regardless of how much money Mr. Skousen said is out there, that makes sense to me.
We are going to have inflation, and certainly I think that certainly when you're talking about hyperinflation, some people would say that would be 20-30%. That's certainly very, very believable. I think we're going to have that. The other people mean when you have the Weimarization or the Zimbabweization of the currency with a total destruction of the value of the currency. So we really have to define our terms, as with so much of what we do, okay?
I thank you for putting such good guests on the air, sir.
Well, we have a lot of good guests, and they're not always going to agree. But I want you to hear all of their opinions, and then, of course, learn how to think objectively. And the first thing is define what we're talking about. God bless. Before we get to Frank, who's calling in from Salinas, I'm going to ask Bob to go ahead and get the final statistics out, how people can get a copy of the World Affairs Brief, how people can subscribe to the World Affairs Brief, and why people should subscribe to the World Affairs Brief. Go right ahead.
Well, I think it's a good publication, but mine is called the International Forecaster.
I apologize. You go right ahead.
I had to tease you. I couldn't let it go.
Oh, you got me, Bob. Go ahead.
And incidentally, it is a good publication, but the International Forecaster is about business, finance, economics, and social and political issues all over the world. And I've been in business and finance. I was trained in university for that, and so I've been doing that for a long time. We publish the International Forecaster on Wednesdays and Saturdays via the Internet, and we have about 40 pages each time. And we have a hard copy that goes out twice a month for those who are not on the Internet. And we like to think that every week, everything that you need to know is in that publication. If you'd like to get a free introductory copy, you can go to theinternationalforecaster.com. Theinternationalforecaster, FORECASTER.com. There's an E in there. You can go to www.intforecaster.com. That's intforecaster.com. If you would like to ask a question, and we answer everyone, or you would like to see our very latest releases for gold and silver shares, just email me at bob@intforecaster.com, bob@intforecaster.com, or you can call 800-375-4188. That's 800-375-4188.
All right, fine. Well, let's go to Frank, who's calling from Salinas. Again, our telephone number, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, or 464-8295. Frank, do you have a question for our guest?
Hi, everyone. I'd like to have Bob give an explanation of what the role of Russia is in the world and today and probably in the near future, and what is happening. Are they still a semi-dictatorship, and what is happening between ConocoPhillips and British Petroleum making deals with the oil companies? And I think there's some company making a deal for some gold company exploration in Russia.
Well, that sort of thing perpetually goes on. That is, doing deals in Russia. The big oil companies are very interested. and they've done business there for quite some time now. And it's understandable. They've had problems. People have gone in exploration and production and basic minerals and gold and silver, platinum, palladium. They've had problems too. It's not an easy place to do business. Is it a semi-dictatorship? Maybe. Although I know people who live in Russia who are not Russian, who immigrated there, and they tell me it's a great place to live. They really like it.
Well, Bob, let me ask you a question. I interviewed a fellow. He had written a book along with one of his friends on the bombing over there. They were both had been with the Soviet intelligence, and you remember that this one fellow his partner ended up getting poisoned with polonium. But one of the things he said to me, he said, you get 50 miles out of the major cities, and it's like going back 100 years. I mean, certainly the major cities are very modern, but you get 50 miles out of town and you go back 100 years. Have you heard that?
Yes, I have, and it's true. And Africa is the same way, because I've lived in Africa just like you have, and it's the same way there. Latin America is not that way. They're behind us, and Western Europe perhaps 10 or 15 or 20 years. It's a shallow comparison. But, yes, Russia, that is a problem. And that's probably one of the reasons why people like living outside of Moscow and St. Petersburg, because it's a giant country, and they don't get the hassles in other places throughout the country. But I think that former people who were within the communist government are still in power in Russia. So far, they seem to be doing their best to run it the best they can. What the underlying political or power motive is, it's hard to say. And I read a lot about Russia. And it's a question to me that's up in the air. Are they trying to be good guys or aren't they? Probably not.
Well, at least not the members of the KGB or they don't call them the KGB anymore than they call them the oligarchs, but the same people are still in power, and the same spiritual forces that guided them during the most brutal parts of the Russian regime still control. That dark spiritual force still controls Russia. Frank, anything else to say before we let you go?
What part of the Russian population is in the cities, roughly? Would you have an idea?
Gee, I really can't say.
Maybe somebody else can answer. Thanks so much. Let's go to Tom calling us from Chicago. Hi, Tom. A question or comment?
Yes, I'd like to ask both of you fellows what you thought of the interview that, in fact, Bob, you were there when it happened, that Alex Jones had with Charlie Sheen and Lenny Dykstra. I think both of them demonstrate the dark side in a lot of ways, and I was just wondering the effect that would have on the Patriot movement.
Well, I don't think that Charlie Sheen has anything to do with the Patriot movement. And the reason...
Actually, you know that... Alex has used his comments that he doesn't believe 9/11 and so forth, and the same with Lenny Dykstra, and he's tried to fold them into the people that are not believers in 9/11.
Well, sometimes you get what you wish for, and it doesn't turn out to be so hot.
Sometimes you have strange bedfellows. Certainly Rosie O'Donnell objects to the 9/11 story as well, but I would agree with Rosie on most things. But a lot of good people really, of course, are on the other side. A lot of strange people are on our side. What we have to do is search for the truth. Anything else, Tom, before we let you go?
Did you notice, Bob, Coeur d'Alene Mining and Silver Wheaton just absolutely went gangbusters today, both of them.
That's true, and all of the rest of them did well as well, except those that had giant days on Friday.
Like mine.
And some of them did.
Yeah,
but I think you can begin to expect that as this new rule takes effect today and on March 1 tomorrow, the new rule says you can't do naked shorts anymore. And that's what's been holding these stocks down. And I believe that there's a good chance that the SEC will have to make it stick this time. And the reason why is that there's tremendous complaints by people who run companies as well as the public saying, you know, who's the criminals here? Is it the SEC or is it the people who are rigging the market?
Or maybe all of the above. Anyway, thanks very much, Tom. And let's go to Reggie calling us from Missouri. Again, our telephone number, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, 1-888-24-LIBERTY, or 464-8295. Ladies and gentlemen, the stock market is rigged. It's called the Working Group for Financial Markets or the Plunge Protection Team. When you're part of this little group, you know which way the market's going because it's legally rigged by a small group. And if you don't think they use that information to feather their own nest and impoverish the public, why, you are incredibly naive. Reggie, any question or comment?
Yes, hi, Stan and Bob. Appreciate your show. And I just wanted to ask, back in January, Bob, you ran an article on the International Forecaster Weekly. It's excerpts online. And in that, you said that on Wednesday, the 5th of January, it emerged that U.S. established related slush fund accounts had been located and seized from the Vatican Bank in Rome, and the source of these accounts was found to be the U.S. Treasury, and there was a lot of beneficiaries from that slush fund that were set up, and it said that they were anticipating the arrest of at least 750 prominent European and U.S. citizens, according to a senior CIA source, but I've heard nothing since that was printed. Do you know?
And you're right, and nothing has been. And they took the information down, and they did it on another issue a couple of weeks ago. And so when that happens, you don't know whether it's true or not. You know, people quickly say, well, it's not there anymore. We don't have any information, and it's not true. That may be so, but we don't know because government steps in and removes the site.
I see.
And so I can't answer the question other than it was reported originally from a reliable source that's disappeared.
And most of these people are all part of the elite anyway in the Davos World Forum, so it's almost like these people are involved in it, so they're not going to make sure that they're arrested themselves.
Amen to that.
And that's true. And so, you know, very often we don't know. Stan and I, years ago, when we were doing work basically against communism, we ran into this all the time. We didn't have the Internet then, but we would immediately have official denunciation of anybody that would question this, that, and the other thing, and it disappeared. Right, Stan?
Amen to that.
Well, it's like it's high treason, though, and they're not even being held accountable when they say that there's millions going, and even $1 billion was supposed to be set aside for the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Roberts. That's just my thought.
You know, we don't know for sure.
Right.
But we also know that there's terrible things going on out there, and so often we can't control them. We can't learn the real truth. I mean,
right.
Even when I was in counterintelligence, I would ask them questions about what was going on, and I was told by the National Security Agency, you have no need to know.
Mm-hmm. Just to remember,
so
Eric,
shut up and get out of here.
Just remember, Eric, that when Bill Clinton left the White House, he was financially destitute. His personal foundation has received almost $500 million, that's B, billion, brilliant, buoyant, $500 million since then for services rendered. They took good care of their own. Thanks very much for calling, and let's go to Eric, who's calling from Washington State. Hi, Eric. You have a question or comment for Bob?
Hey, I have a couple questions. Isn't the true problem with the Federal Reserve the fact that they have a monopoly on the printing of currency, and that every time they loan out currency, you have to pay them back the principal plus interest that they didn't loan out, causing bankruptcies?
Okay, that's all true. And at the end of the day, each year, all the money that they make, less expenses, goes to the U.S. Treasury. That is not the problem. The problem is they're not using inside information. They make the inside information. They control our country. And that's really what it's all about.
That's what it's all about, ladies and gentlemen. That's what it's all about. Well, this is Dr. Stan, and certainly Eric is saying, well, printing money, why does it? Certainly, if a local community prints up some sort of exchange, why doesn't that create inflation? And it's because it's on a very, very limited basis. But when the governments create money and they simply expand the money supply dramatically, that's where inflation comes from. Thanks very much for your call. And Bob, we're out of time. Parting thought before I let you go so you can come back this evening.
I'm looking forward to coming back this evening.
God bless. Thanks so much. Okay, bye-bye. All right.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. That's been Bob Chapman. And certainly, I think it's vitally important that you understand what's going on. There is massive inflation coming now. Basically, when I say massive inflation, we're talking about, let's say, 20%. The price of oil is going up, the price of gasoline is going up, the price of food is going up, and we're going to see, of course, a lot of people certainly beginning to have lower living standards. It's all planned. If you want to read the plan, it's in the Foreign Affairs magazine, November-December 2010, written by Roger Altman and Richard Haass, high officials of the Brotherhood of Darkness, and of course by Morton Zuckerman, Trilateral Commission CFR, the last issue in December of the U.S. News and World Report.